I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into Freedom Lost by Mark Handy. It is a riveting dystopian thriller that explores the terrifying consequences of unchecked power. In this gripping novel, a renegade president dismantles the Constitution and rules with an iron fist. But resistance rises in the form of true American grit. With conspiracy theories becoming reality, this edge of your seat story will leave you questioning just how fragile freedom really is. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Good River Print and Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. We ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Mark, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Pleasure to be here.
This is very timely, very topical. How much of this is inspired by our current political scene?
Not a bit of it.
Okay.
I began this book a long time ago. It's just life has a way of imitating fiction.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, because our presidential election right now, you have the Trump people saying that Harris will be a communist dictator, and you have Harris's people saying Trump will be a fascist dictator. We have a choice between two dictators, I guess, now here in the United States. But we'll see how that pans out. So this is a book and a story you've been thinking about for a long time.
Yes, it is. Been in the work for quite a while. The book actually got published about 9 years ago, and it's just been really hard getting my foot into the publicity doorway, if you will.
Simply getting the word out there that you've written this great
Yes,
book and people
I've made
should.
great strides since hooking up with great Good River, the good people there.
They are good people. So let's give the folks at home an overview. Tell us about your book.
Um, it begins with the protagonist Mace being in Chicago, hooking up with resistance, and he does meet up with the resistance. Goes through a qualification process, if you will, where they verify who he is. There's a flashback to an incident, much like the Alamo. I call it the Cochise Stronghold, which is an actual place in Arizona. And this is where some patriots first took a stand against the tyrant. And then after the flashback, it goes into him interacting with the resistance and kicking the hornet's nest.
Tell us a little bit about Mace Wallace, how you came up with him as a character, what he represents, and who would play him in the movie of this story.
Well, the inspiration from Mace is not much to come. It's me.
Mm.
um, I am Mace. There's variations, of course, obviously, but it's when I was writing about it, I was put it into my mind how I would do things, and the story just developed around that.
Yeah.
Who would play me in the movie? I don't know.
Let me
Matthew
see.
McConaughey. I don't.
How about Chris Pine?
Chris Pine would be a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That'd
Oh,
be a good one. Yep, absolutely. So you've envisioned this as a movie, perhaps. I mean, it's a very, it's such a wonderfully epic story with such strong characters and, the fate of America, which is the fate of the world on the line. You've got very high stakes here. You've envisioned this as a movie, haven't you?
absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody that's read it asks me why it isn't a movie yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be great. Well, Hollywood, if you're listening, this would be a great film. It's a
Yes.
wonderful story. Um, when I know this was written years ago, at least in your head and then on paper, but when you see what's happening in our political scene, does it scare you that what you wrote about as science fiction in a way, as fiction, could become reality?
Yep. It definitely scares me. Um, the question mark is if it was to come to pass, how many people would jump on board the solution, rectifying it, taking back our government?
Yeah. It's strange. I mean, we live in a world that you and I could not picture growing up. I mean, I don't
No,
think we pictured this. We pictured Dick Tracy watches maybe where we could talk to each other, but this phone that does so much stuff, we never could picture it. I don't think we'd ever picture our freedom of speech as compromised as it is by social media. What are your thoughts on that?
um, I don't really participate in social media.
Mm.
I have Facebook accounts just to keep up with my family, and then I have one for my book. I've got a Facebook set up for it. But as far as freedom of speech, the way they're censoring people, there needs to be some reins put on these folks. They've got to be reminded that the Constitution applies to them too. They cannot, they can't be censoring folks based on their own priorities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you hope readers take away from the story of the abuse of power and rebellion that comes?
What I'd like for folks to take away from this is an appreciation for what they have. Because right now everything is still in place.
Yeah.
The Constitution is in place. The checks and balances are there, kind of loose, but they're
Yeah.
still there. And when people exercise their freedom of speech or freedom of religion, I would hope that they understand where it came from. The founding fathers thought up what was important to have in this country, and they put it down and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Why you're able to live like you are. It's why we're able to do this now.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we're blessed to live in this country where even if our freedoms are being encroached upon now, we still have more freedoms than most people in any other corner of the world.
Yep.
That's for sure. And if you don't believe me, just ask somebody who comes here and escapes another country, and they realize that this is such a wonderful country. Watching the country through their eyes is probably the most profound because you and I take it for granted, but people who escaped China or escaped Venezuela and come here realize like, wow, this is not only the land of plenty, the land of opportunity, but it's a land of liberty and freedom.
Yep.
And, to quote Superman, and justice for all, for sure. Is this your first time writing a book?
Yep. This is my first one. The second one is in the works. It's a sequel.
Okay, tell
So
us about the sequel. Where are you going to pick up from?
it picks up at the end of this book, pretty much right at the end of it. It expands on the story, the battles that begin between supporters of the president and his opponents.
Mm.
It gets into people's views on it, and how the governments might line up, most specifically the state governments,
Mhm.
because the second story reminds everybody we're a republic,
Mm.
and the states are a very powerful part of this government.
Yeah.
Everybody's focusing on the federal government so much they forget states are the cornerstone.
Yeah. And we saw that very, very true. And we saw it play out during the pandemic. There were some
Mm-hmm.
states that had complete lockdowns
Yep.
and other states that more or less life went on and you could, just enjoy your life and go to your restaurant or go to your beach or take a walk. I mean, the idea that we couldn't even take a walk was crazy. I myself fled to Florida when when it happened, and I was glad I did because I was able to take walks and go to the beach and eventually, and not too long afterwards, go to restaurants and all of that. But other states were locked down. What
Yeah, it
was
was
your
scary.
experience like during the pandemic? And was this resonating through your head when you thought about your book and the lockdowns and the curtailment of our freedoms?
Actually, no, the pandemic never really affected my thinking regarding the book. Um, it didn't uh, inspire another story. It's more of a short story. That's that's in the works as well. But the pandemic didn't really play into freedom lost at all.
Right. But what were your thoughts during the pandemic? Did you feel like, hey, my book is coming true?
Um, Not really, because while there were restrictions on freedoms. It wasn't extreme.
Mhm.
It was scary
Yeah.
because yeah, I could see how it could transition to my book very easily. Um, but it wasn't nationwide, like you said. There were states that complied, other states that didn't. And as long as you have that individual state power,
Yeah.
then my book doesn't really come into play there. On an individual level, thank God Arizona was not very restrictive.
Right.
Um, doesn't really matter much anyway, because if I'm not home, I'm out in the woods somewhere. So
Yeah. Well, I was in New York and I thought Governor Cuomo was going to, like, I don't know, board us into our houses or something. So I decided to escape.
there you go.
Um, yeah. So it does depend drastically on what state you're in. I mean, as an actor, I couldn't work unless I was vaccinated. Everything was shut down. I mean, it was a tough time, I think, for a lot of folks out there. And I think
Yep,
for a lot of people, I think they saw what happens when our freedoms are taken away. So I do think, although your book is not born out of that experience, I think it kind of resonates that feeling and vibe of losing your liberty and freedom, things that we
I agree.
shouldn't take for granted. What's the reaction when people read your book? Do they think you're from the left or do they think you're from the right? Can they tell? Tell us a little bit about that, what type of reaction you get. Because I'm sure you get some people say, oh, you're definitely a Republican or you're definitely a Democrat. Because, like I said, both sides tried to paint the other as dictators.
Well, that's one thing about the book is there are no political parties mentioned.
Mm.
Book is totally apolitical. I never say what party the president is from, nothing like that at all. It's purely people's actions and their beliefs that are the cornerstone of the story. As far as reactions, it depends on the people. Um, I was at the Tucson Festival of Books last year, and I had a guy come up, read the synopsis, said, "Oh my God, you wrote this about Trump," because this was after he said something about the Constitution, and I was like,
Right.
"No." And
Exactly.
I have family who are devout uh, Democrats, and they read it when Obama was in office, and
Mm.
they got very upset. Oh, you wrote a story about Obama? No, I
That's
didn't.
funny. Exactly. It's like beauty. It's in the eyes of the beholder. Depending on what your standpoint is, you'll say, oh, you're attacking Trump. Oh, you're attacking Obama, whatever it is. That's kind of the intrigue of the book, of course, as well. Talk to us a little bit about the Cochise Stronghold Massacre and the significance in the story.
When I was writing uh, the book, I was back in Indiana on a family vacation, sitting in my uncle's house along the Wabash River and just sitting back. And we watched John Wayne movie, The Alamo. And I was watching it, and it just seemed to link up what they were trying to do as far as separating from Mexico, but mostly making a stand. And it just came in, it just fell into place that I needed something like the Alamo
Mm.
as a cohesive element uh, for the not only the story, but for the people in the story to rally around.
Mm.
And I chose Cochise Stronghold because I've been there many times. It was an Indian stronghold, very hard for the cavalry to get to them. Of course, in modern days, that wouldn't be much of a problem with the aerial capabilities of the military. But yeah, I just needed the sacrifice of patriots to be involved in the story. Of course, most of the people in that are my friends who became characters, and many of them were mad because you killed me off, Mark.
That's funny.
Hey, you went out with a blaze of glory. Okay, just think Davy Crockett. Okay,
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. So some of the characters are based on real life people in your life?
yes,
Yeah. Tell
yes,
us
most of
about choosing that and why you chose those people and the characters in the book.
um the characters in the Stronghold are basically my core of friends that I camp with, hunt with, motorcycle rides with. um, and I know them. So there was very little character development that I had to do. I took them, tweaked this here and there, and came up with the members of SAS, the Southern Arizona Sportsman Society. Um, the main characters uh, are Dell and Layla, the resistance in Chicago. Um, Dell was created with a friend of mine, Lee Studeman. He, at the beginning, was a very, very instrumental part in me getting through a writer's block. I just couldn't get through this one, so he came over to my apartment. And we sat, had a couple beers, talked it through, and I started typing, and it just wall came tumbling down.
Wonderful.
Yep. Character of Dell was modeled after him. My friend Lee is not Dell. He's somebody that was in the Stronghold, but a lot of Dell is focused on Lee. And then Layla, I was told by folks when I was writing the story that you need to have some romance in it, Mark. I had no romance in it. I'm not a romantic type of writer, but I saw their point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was dating a lady at the time, and she became Layla.
Hmm.
She was the inspiration of Layla.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's always good to throw a little romance in. Always a good idea to have a love story involved as well, without a doubt. Tell us about the character of the president, how he abuses power, how you came up with the concept of this man.
um, Concept came from imagining a president taking advantage of every um, aspect of his office. Now, there's one thing about the president that doesn't come out in this book. It's heavily in the next book, but the conspiracy aspect of dark government uh, plays into lording how he gets into office, and his story is more pronounced in my second book, in the second story, the sequel. But he gets into power simply because he tells everybody what they want to hear,
Mm.
and whether he's going to follow through with that promise or not, he just says yeah, and he supports everything, supports, tells
Yeah.
people what they want to hear, and he gets in office. Once he's in, uh, then the dark government comes in and helps him to take care of things. The the incident where there's the overthrow of the government, where Lording is able to justify enacting FEMA and take and installing martial law. I took one instance from history. I like history, and the he used what I used an incident from pre-Nazi Germany, where Hitler staged a raid on the Reichstag, the German version of Congress, and he blamed it on the communists. Well, you've got this act, you blame it on the guys you want to get rid of. It kind of fell in line here. I've got a president who wants to get rid of patriots, people with guns who are people with guns are the only people that can stand up against the government. Once they get rid of the Second Amendment and the right for the people to have guns, anybody in government can do what they want, because
Yeah.
we're the only people that can take it back.
Yeah.
So that's a historical thing that I like using. It's something that actually happened in history. Why couldn't it happen again?
Exactly. I mean, yesterday there was a school shooting, for example, and
Oh
of
yeah,
course, right away comes a call to get rid of guns. Um, what are your thoughts on that aspect of the Constitution? Do you feel that guns are a vital part of our democracy?
absolutely. Um, Going back to the founding fathers and the start of the country, if people didn't have guns in their homes, we'd still be a British territory. It's only because people were able to fight the British that we gained our independence. That's why it was put into the Constitution, Bill of Rights, the right to own and keep guns. Uh, Things like school shootings, I shake my heads because it's so sad that there's people that do that type of thing. But I was reading about it. The guy that did that had already been identified as a possible threat. And this is my thing when people talk about gun control. We have laws in place. We have safety measures in place. We identify people. We need to use that before we come up with more. Use what's on the books, prosecute, and this is a big one, prosecute people. They don't shoot themselves and they go to trial, prosecute people. Mm-hmm. You got to show that there's consequences. I'm old school, and public hangings, I think, have conveyed a very strong message,
right,
especially to the young people. You know, this is what happens when you mess up.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't do that anymore. We don't even enact the death penalty that's more humane, but we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. We got some very effective laws. Um, you can't own a fully automatic weapon. So all this talk about assault guns, assault weapons are fully automatic. They're what we have. The, the guns that look like military weapons, they're not military weapons. They're not assault weapons. They can't fire fully automatic. That's already against the law.
Right.
So
exactly.
We need to have it. One of the founding fathers, I forget which one, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, said that when people are tired of the government, and I'm paraphrasing on it, when people are tired of the government, it is their responsibility and right to take it back and start over again.
Agreed.
And that's a founding father. That's
Yep.
one of the people who started this country, and he could see the imperfections that could happen.
Yeah.
And they put in place how that could be a reality with the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Are there bad people out there? Yeah, there's bad people out there. You don't publish everybody as on a whole for the acts of the bad people, and I don't want to get into that so much.
Right. No, but you're right on target. I mean, the laws to prevent school shootings really are already there. This kid was interviewed by the FBI. His father covered up for him, apparently. And then his father bought him an AR-15 for Christmas, knowing that the kid had been making threats against the school, and he buys the kid an AR-15. Fortunately, that father's being charged with murder now. I think I believe in freedom of guns, the right to bear arms. But, with great rights come great responsibility. And if you're letting your kid get his hands on a gun when he's troubled, you need to pay a price. So hopefully the father does pay a price there. I think you're on the money. If gun control laws worked, Chicago would be the safest city in America. Stickers on every door. You walk into a restaurant, it says firearms not allowed.
Yep.
But the only one who's not listening to that are the good guys. The bad guys are still going in with guns.
Yep.
That's the problem with gun control laws is it only targets the people who aren't criminals because murder is against the law and they have no problem breaking that law too. So, but I think
be
you're
called
100%.
outlaws because they live outside the law.
Exactly. Your book alludes a little bit to this or deals with this, and something that people talk about in our society too, that there's a deep state, like a dark force that really runs things. Do you feel there really is a deep state, that there's this entrenched bureaucracy that runs things, and our president at times is sometimes just lip service to the people, or our democracy is lip service to the people?
No, that's a very deep question. I believe that there is something that could be called the dark government. I don't think it's as influential or as extensive as the conspiracy theorists, pardon me, as far as they push it. If the dark government had that much influence, they'd be in power already. Uh, but I
Unless
do
they are.
believe there are, I, unless they are.
Yeah.
True, true.
Yeah.
Um, I forgot where I was
No,
going.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you like that,
No, it's okay. Um,
but yeah, we're talking
it's
about the deep state and whether there is a dark state and whether there are these malevolent forces that are really running things and that our democracy is only lip service.
Yeah. You could definitely argue that, as you just said, maybe they're already in control and they're just doing a really good job of PR.
Right.
But in my thinking, that I think they're an influence um, that they exert here and there. Uh, and as long as there's good people in government that can see it and stand up to them, they will not be able to do what they want to do, which is totally run the country.
As long as you have some Mace Wallaces out there,
Exactly.
without a doubt. And Mace Wallace doesn't even need to raise arms. He needs to raise his voice. I mean, people who feel like their liberties are being encroached upon should speak up, and hopefully they do. Before we leave you today, anything you want to leave the audience with, anything you'd like them to know about your book or take away from your book?
Um, Next time you're out of your house and you're walking around, you're at the mall or you're at the park, you go to a book fair, look around, and take an appreciative view of what you're able to do in this country. If you don't own one, I would suggest getting a copy of the Constitution. It's a hard read because the language is 200 plus years old, but it comes to home what they say in there.
Absolutely. Amen. Great advice. And of course, folks at home should pick up this book. It's called Freedom Lost. It's written by Mark Handy. It is a riveting dystopian thriller that explores the terrifying consequences of unchecked power. It is a gripping novel about a renegade president who dismantles the Constitution and rules with an iron fist. But fortunately, the good guys rise up, the resistance rises up in the form of true American grit. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing journey. A sequel is forthcoming, and you will just love this series. Mark, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time, sir. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time until next time on Spotlight.